Don't let rampant politics and clusterfuckery ruin all your projects and your sanity. Smooth ugly penny lines and make it all make sense. Get experience by osmosis here on Corporate Underpants.
Hi, I'm Tamara Adlin. It is Thursday, June 26, 2025. I am joining you from the West Coast of the United States of America in Seattle, Washington. And most of the country here is under shocking amounts of heat wave. I'm glad that I am not. I don't think our guest today is either. And before we get started, Corporate Underpants is my baby. And really, it's all about the real problems that get in the way of us and creating great products. And my observation summed up is it has nothing to do with how good we are at the processes we've been learning or teaching. And as we become more senior, we realize or should realize that we cannot stay out of politics and internal politics, not outside. Everybody should be in outside politics at this point. We cannot stay out of what we call internal politics. We have to learn how to help senior stakeholders get to the clarity and the crispness and the consistency and stick with it that will help us keep us sane during our jobs, able to do all those great processes and able to launch products that aren't held together with chewing gum and wire and features that we never come back to and stuff that somebody read in some article somewhere. Okay, and then I'll just start with my thought for this week. My thought for this week is we talk so much amongst ourselves about really like detailed topics, especially if you're on LinkedIn all the time. It's like really in the weeds. Meanwhile, when I go out and talk to prospective customers of mine, clients of my consulting work, it is astounding to me the range of technical knowledge that is out there. And by that, the range on the lower end. Sometimes I see language that I'm completely befuddled by. And I think a first instinct would be to say, oh, they must be describing something that I just haven't seen in my life yet. Or the words they're using are coming out of no visibility of the kinds of things that we talk about all the time. So I think this kind of customer awareness, this kind of user awareness is really critical. And this whole idea of focusing on the communications in your organizations related to you and anybody else you work with or want to work with is amazingly helpful and something that it's so easy to turn a blind eye to, unfortunately. But we're going to get past that. And with that, I am going to introduce, I am so bananas excited about this. My friend and UX weirdo, Julie Francis. And I'm going to tell you about Julie if for some reason you've been living under a rock and don't know Julie. Julie Francis is a CX and UX researcher and strategist with over 20 years of 20 years of experiences, not just experience, helping businesses make better decisions. She's the founder of Bella Via Research, and she has worked with clients including Google, Lyft, Spotify, The Gap, Walmart, and others. I haven't heard of any of those, but maybe they're okay. She recently put her consulting life on hold to spend 5 years inside Meta. That must have been a trip and a half, focused on VR, virtual reality. And now she's back to consulting, working with clients to build alignment on the most important problems to solve, to deliver a great customer experience and what to do about them. That sounds a little bit familiar. She also teaches a popular course called Best Practices for Journey Mapping. That's on Maven. Julie's journey herself and her journey mapping work began with a talk at UXPA, the User Experience Professionals Association, where, true to her research roots, she kicked things off by interviewing 20 people to figure out how to maximize the impact of journey mapping. She's been building and evolving best practices ever since. What year was that, Julie, that you did that UXPA talk?
2015.
Oh, see, I thought you were going to say like 1998 or something.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I was working with Walmart at the time, and my client, Jeannie Bard, and I were putting in very long hours creating a set of personas for Walmart.com. And we were in the massage chairs at Walmart's headquarters in San Bruno, California, late at night. So then this is back in the days where companies bought us massage chairs. And she was like, hey, let's begin a conference together. I was like, cool, let's do that. She was like, what do you want to talk about? I was like, I don't know. I'll talk about anything. What do you want to talk about? She was like, journey mapping. I said, cool, let's talk about journey mapping. She said, what do you know about journey mapping? I was like, yeah, really nothing. So, and I said, what do you know about journey mapping? And she said, yeah, really nothing. And so it was a topic we both wanted to learn more about. So what we did was approach it like researchers. Let's go find out what makes a really good journey map.
Why did you choose journey mapping then? If neither of you How
We
the hell
have
does that happen?
we were starting to hear more and more about it. I don't know what she was hearing, but I was hearing great companies like Adaptive Path doing a lot of journey mapping work, and I was just intrigued. Is this a framework that I should add to my own practice? And so we started by interviewing 20 people, stakeholders, designers, researchers, people that created journey maps or were the intended beneficiaries of the map. And we weren't sure what we were going to learn. What makes a great journey map? Oh, it needs a circle like this. Oh, it needs to have different colors for every phase. We didn't know what we were going to learn, right? What we learned is the map itself doesn't matter at all. And in fact, people are putting way too much emphasis on the map as a deliverable, as a beautiful museum piece, portfolio. Oh, I'm going to get a promotion. And what they needed to be focusing on was the process of mapping, building alignment on the journey. And
Sure.
so I have shipped journey maps when I was in house at Meta that were made out of basically chewing gum and paper. Like I'm literally made a journey map. It's so incredibly ugly. It's brown butcher paper. The swim lanes and columns are created by thin masking tape, and there's post-its everywhere. Because we did that collaboratively, because we got the teams together to have the hard conversations, cross-functional people working it out. This is what I think. That's what I think. Oh, look what the data says. It delivered the impact we needed. We brought in a designer, had them make it look better, and it was actually a waste of time and money. All we needed were those conversations. Maybe we should define what a journey map is.
I was going to say that
Yeah.
because let me interrupt you. First of all, I
Yeah.
love the idea of a butcher paper journey map. I hope you took pictures of it because I
Oh,
just think
yeah.
it's the coolest. It's really similar for me. There's a lot of overlaps for us. And so I'm going to keep diving in with
Yeah.
some of these overlaps. So in 2005, the first persona lifecycle book came out that I authored with John Pruitt. And people have weird feelings about personas, obviously,
Yes.
just like they have weird feelings about journey maps. And there's many different definitions for what each of those things are. But I love the way you put that journey maps are a verb, not a noun. And I actually think personas, or at least alignment personas, are exactly the same thing. The artifact just happens to reflect the clarity that you have been able to achieve, partially from breaking down all the defenses just by making everybody translate something onto a sticky note. Even just that can help get everybody. It's literally the same page. It's
Yeah.
literally. And the other thing about journey maps that I want you to respond to is like they and in chapter I'm sorry, in chapter you got me all excited. In chapter 10 of the first persona life cycle, there's a chapter on reality maps and design maps, which I did with Holly Jamison Carr. And reality maps are using sticky notes to map how someone does something today or how job gets done today. And design maps are how can we make that better still in mapping format. And by the way, anybody who's listening, if you're interested in that chapter is available for free now because it's so long since the book is published on my adlininc.com/articles page. And you can go take a look at that. And of course, take Julie's course. So Julie, define journey maps.
Yeah. I'm going to give you my definition, and then I'm going to give you a definition I actually prefer. So I say a journey map is an illustration of a person's thing with over time. Who's the person? Customer, buyer, user, employee, patient, could be anybody. Experience with a thing. What is that? Could be a feature, it could be the entire end-to-end product experience from the time you learn of a company to the time you decide if you're going to be loyal or churn over time. And it's the over time piece that differentiates a journey map from just any old infographic. So that's my definition. ChatGPT has a definition that's much longer. But my colleague and now client, Catherine Lovazano, who's at Google, she and I met when we were both at Meta. She describes or defines a journey map as a way of organizing insights for the purpose of shared understanding and action. And what I love about that is that it focuses on why we create journey maps, right? Most people think of a journey map as an artifact. And she says, no, no, a journey map is something that helps us build alignment and get us somewhere. And where is that somewhere? Sometimes companies create journey maps because they're trying to figure out what are our biggest opportunities to move the needle on the metrics we care most about. So whether we're focused on retention or engagement or premium conversion, we have a goal or an intention this year that we're going to move the needle on this thing or these couple of things. Sometimes they'll map out the journey. What are our biggest opportunities to move the needle on that or those metrics? Sometimes companies don't know what the metric is. They don't know. Everybody has a different idea of what we're trying to move the needle
I
on.
would say they never know. I would say no, because that's my whole thing, right? The minute two people get in a room and have a conversation, something shifts and no one writes it down. So by modus ponens, we can deduce that nobody knows exactly what the business goals are. Because you can't then raise your hand and say, have things shifted because it looks like you missed the meeting, but everybody missed the meeting.
Yeah.
I also love what you said about I love both of those definitions. I think when I've thought about journey maps, the things I've especially loved are that it's someone interacting with something over time. Because
Yeah.
no matter how complex the system is, ChatGPT, VR, whatever it is, or something simple like signing up for a newsletter, human beings exist in time. We do one thing at a time. And usually it's best if whatever we're doing now made it really easy to do the next thing. And often when something is hard to do, it's because we didn't do the thing before. So the marvelous thing about journey maps in companies is it gets people off of their hype cycle about the tech and the newness and the feature complexity and the checkbox of what we have against our competitors and gets them back to, wait a second. People are going to have to do this one step at a time, and we better make sure we know what those steps are.
Yeah, and I think you often see when you're creating what I call a current state journey map, which you call a reality map, what you often see is that companies are shipping the org and they don't even realize what the full experience is like for them. And I was living this morning, actually, I got an email from WebRoot, which I use for my antivirus and VPN and stuff. And I made a change to my WebRoot subscription recently where I was like, I'm not going to buy that package. I'm going to buy this package instead. And I went to their website and upgraded, right? So they know this is the same person. Julie Francis pays for all this security stuff. And now she wants the bigger option. They keep sending me emails that say, your WebRoot subscription has expired. And I keep deleting these emails. And I'm like, you guys, the right hand has no idea what the left hand is doing. Are you kidding me? Like, why are you bugging me with all these stupid emails? And that's the kind of thing that when you create a journey map and you say at this point in the process, here's how they're interacting in this channel and that channel. All it would take is for these people to get in a room and go, oh my God, we're driving our customers crazy. Yeah, you are, WebRoot.
But they don't, because any business P&L related bottom line goal, if it is clear, is about new customers, and then there's a completely separate one about upsell. And by the way, the definition of corporate underpants, it's just my cute way of saying shipping your org. When
Yeah.
your product shows communication problems in your org or lack of communication in your org, that's like wearing your underpants on the outside of your suit, or seeing somebody with a beautiful outfit, but you can see all of their underwear lines underneath it. You're seeing stuff you're not supposed to see.
Yeah.
And it's messing with your experience. And an older name for that is Conway's Law, which people can look up too, which I just discovered recently. That is the same thing, that because people have trouble communicating, period, they certainly have trouble in hierarchical organizations like the ones we work for. And because of that, there's a classic Conway's Law quote that if you get in a car, you can tell if the steering wheel team hated the gear shift team, right? If things just don't work together.
I have a great example of this from a recent consulting project I did. This was with a retailer, and they asked me to come in and map the omni-channel journey. And what I tell my clients is like,
Omnichannel. There's a
Oh,
word.
I can go out and do this. This is what I
Listen,
do.
If
You
you
can
think
write-
if you think AI is a pain in the ass to read about, 5 years ago, go on LinkedIn and read about frickin' omni-channel. Keep going.
So anyway, you can hand me a project and I can go off and do that by myself. I could have gone off, done the research, handed them a journey map and said, okay, here's your invoice, throwing your map over the fence. But I actually really believe that that research needs to be done in-house. So companies bring me in to help their teams up-level their skills. So we're working together so that when I leave, they know how to do it, but also it's in their brain. And we ended up mapping this omni-channel experience. And what we found was that the store team and the digital team were like this. And you could see in the
They were
customer
fighting.
experience they're shipping that these two teams can't play together nicely.
Right.
So what does that look like for their customers? It's like, why can I buy that online, but it's not available in the store, or it's more expensive in the store? Or when I return things, why is it so much faster to get my money back if I go to the store versus if I ship it back to you? Like all these disjointed experiences that customers were like, what is going on here?
And they just pile up because so I was complaining at one of the episodes about how I literally could not, as a senior tech person in the world, figure out how to apply the shelf coupon for the Chobani oat milk into the digital coupon that it had to be. I could not do it because for this reason, I think. And because they're like, oh, we'll just add a new loyalty program. And so then you end up with this app that has 47 million different ways to save money and none of them work.
Yeah. So what we did in that consulting engagement was we got those teams online. It was not so much that they didn't know these things already. In fact, when I presented to the head of this retailer, literally what he said was, "There's nothing new in here." And at first I was like, "Huh? I just delivered research insights and there's nothing new." And then I was like, wait a minute. This is revealing a serious organizational problem because if none of this information is new, but you're not acting on it, what's going on inside your org?
Okay, we have to write that in big
Right.
letters. And I want to pick on this a little bit more, right? I want to ask you, why did those two teams not get along?
I
Do
have
you
no
remember?
idea. I don't know why. I don't know why, but that's what we did in the end. In the end, we built alignment so that these two teams are working together for the first time. That's the feedback I got at the end of this journey mapping engagement because we focused on the process. So instead of just saying, here's the journey map, we created like a really great video that shows it's animated illustrations and then it cuts to like customer footage from our interviews. And then there's a voiceover of me saying, blah, blah, blah. And they ended up showing that to all 40,000 of their store managers.
Because it
Real
was clear.
buy-in. This is why we're changing our omni-channel strategy. And they got buy-in. They finally got buy-in and they're working together. They're on the same page now,
I
which
have
is
so
pretty
many
exciting.
stories like that. I think I
Yeah.
was telling you this legal services software, I did a journey map of the entire process of electronic discovery for a legal case, and it ended up being literally 35 feet long on the wall. It had nothing new in it, but it was shown to everybody because nobody had ever looked at the end-to-end process this way. So I wanna hold on. So people seeking seniority, you're looking at 2 people who have become senior in our field. Julie went into a meeting with a senior leader, showed a map, and the response was, "There's nothing new here." Tell me what makes someone senior in facing that moment. And meaning, what did you do? How did you react? Did you feel like you were gonna throw up? Did you how did your brain what did you say?
Oh, that is a really good question. I don't remember what I said because I was flipping out. I was like, oh my God, they just paid me all this money to do this for them and they're not happy with what they got. But my process, and this is what I found in all those interviews I did, the single biggest differentiator for a journey map with impact is whether it was collaboratively created. It actually doesn't matter what it looks like. You can create an absolutely gorgeous journey map or gorgeous set of personas. And if that's all they are is artifacts and no one knows how to use them, believes in them, feels inspired to use them, then nothing changes, right?
That's right, even if they're
That's
chock full of data. If
yeah,
you data doesn't work, and so I
the
had
data
this
is not
analogy in
enough.
an old article I think we were talking about before, which is if the ground is dry and cracked, it doesn't matter how many seeds you throw on it. They're
Yes, I
never gonna grow.
absolutely love that analogy. And I think we've got a problem in the user research world right now where we're hiring people who are expert in making those seeds. We get so many seeds. We have so many people with PhDs making seeds and throwing them into earth that can't do anything with them. And I would really love to see us as a profession evolving more towards how can we work more effectively? And it is not about doing more research, more methodological rigor. We need good research, right? But it's really more about how do we get people on board, believing these insights and ready to act on them. And that is all about collaboration and building alignment and the relationships we have. And I love the podcast you did, and you're gonna have to remind me of her name, but the woman that co-wrote the book Aligned.
Oh, that was written by Bruce McCarthy and Melissa Appel, and both of them have been guests. Melissa's amazing. Yeah, what do you think of that book and the Aligned?
I just bought it. I haven't read it yet, but I'm pretty excited because I think that's what it's all about, right? It's not about getting more insights. It's about being in the right meeting, the trusted person. Oh, we can't proceed with this decision until we get this person's input on it because they really understand our customers. How do we transfer the content of our brains to those people, or at least make sure we're in the right meeting at the right time, we've been invited to the right doc, and so forth? Because we need to make sure our insights are being used, not that we're just generating them.
So
But
what would you say if you had just to model it for the youngsters out there, even though most of the people here are trying to get more senior in their career, what would you say now if you walked in and I was the boss and you showed me a journey map that had taken a lot of work and I say there's nothing new in here, what would you say to me?
I would say, let's see if your team feels like there's nothing new in here, and let's work with the team to figure out what they believe are the biggest opportunities here. And that's so much of what I'm doing in my work is here's a whole bunch of insights. Which things are the biggest opportunities for you guys to move the needle on the metrics you care most about? And if they don't know what metrics they care most about, I'm helping them define that. If
That's
they
what I do. I help them clarify business goals. They
Yeah,
all every time I do a contract, they're like, "You can take this out, we have them." And I'm like, "Send them over," and they never have them,
right.
ever.
Exactly. Or
So
they have them, but nobody knows they have them. So if you ask, you do your stakeholder interviews, you talk to 10 different people, they all have a different answer to that question.
exactly, and there's another thing there with the whole idea of so you're a researcher, you come from the research world, I come from the design world, which should be more interrelated, but not always are. But with research, I would imagine, if I didn't know any better, that the most important part of anything like a journey map is to show you new things that are possible, but most of the time that are based on data. Now that we know this about our users, here's some new things that we should do. As often as not, because I always start with the basics and just with how people are thinking today and what we call assumptions. Even just mapping it shows you 7 things that aren't working that have
Yep.
nothing to do with data. Oh, by the way, it is physically impossible to create a new account by yourself online. It doesn't take any data for me to show you.
Right.
Do you find that too, that it's old news is new news?
It can be. And I think also when we talk about journey mapping, I like to say if someone says journey mapping to you, imagine they said a document. So somebody
Yep.
can come to you and say, we need a journey map. Pretend they said, we need a document. And your response needs to be, I can write documents all day long. How much can I charge you for that document? Because we're consultants, right? But what you need to say is why. What are you thinking you're going to do with that? How are you going to use it? It's the same with personas. What are we going to do with that? How do we think people are going to use them? Why are we doing it? Why this moment? And so forth. So that's how in my course that I teach and the consulting I do with clients, I say, there are 5 things we need to do to boost the impact of journey maps. And I would say you could apply these directly to personas and jobs to be done for that matter. So when you think about the journey of creating a journey map or the journey of creating personas, what do? You start with the initiation phase. Then you go into the insights gathering phase. And I know we have slightly different opinions on that, but I actually think we're very aligned. Then you go into creating the artifact. I call that the customization phase because you're customizing to the objectives and the intended audience. Then you're launching. And then, so really there's 4 phases, but there's 5 principles that go with that. Your maps need to be focused. You need to start by building alignment. What are we mapping? Why? Who is this for? Then you need to go gather data, existing data, go conduct research. Then you need to customize what you're creating, your personas, your jobs to be done, whatever, to your audience. How are they going to use this? That has a lot of influence over the trade-off decisions you make in your map. And then finally, your maps need to be integrated, meaning they need to be integrated in the way that teams work. You can't just put an artifact on the wall and think it's going to have any influence. You need to understand, is there an offsite y'all are having where this could be helpful? Let me help you create a workshop where your team, your product managers can use this as a way to influence their roadmap, or your innovation team can use this to find unmet opportunities where we can innovate, or just figure out what are the biggest pain points for these users and let's prioritize fixing those.
Oh my god.
And then finally,
So
running through all of them is that you need to do this as collaboratively as possible from start all the way through the end. And that's what makes a journey map have impact. That's what makes personas have impact. And personas kind of fell out of favor. And I'm actually concerned jobs to be done are on the same trajectory. Journey maps, I think, are on the same trajectory. Why? Because the people that are creating them treat them as artifacts. They don't treat this as a tool that we're going to use to build alignment.
Anybody who knows me knows that my head is pretty much exploding right now because if we had just switched a few words, everything you just said could have been me. And with a little pause here, Julie and I have been working about the same amount of time in this field, which is too long to mention considering how fabulous we both look. But you can tell because we have colorful glasses. As you get to a certain age, you end up with colorful glasses. So anyway, we have come to parallel ways of thinking, which may be a good piece of data in and of itself. Starting out specializing in our field and getting even more specialized in one technique in our field, and both coming to the conclusion that it's not about the artifact. And I'm totally stealing this, Julie. When you say, if somebody asks for a journey map, it's like asking for a document. I'm going to say the same thing because people really don't realize that about personas. And they yell about whether personas are valuable or not, have data or not, or whatever. And it's which one and what are you trying to solve? If you're for personas, what I say is if you're doing data driven personas, the problem you should be trying to solve is that everybody already agrees on our users, but they're wrong about them. That's the only time that it makes sense to start with data. And even then, you should have done alignment personas before that. We're arguing about the wrong stuff. I really do think it's interesting that it's almost like twin studies where twins have been growing up apart and end up with so many similar things. So
Yeah.
this is how to learning these skills, whatever tool you use. Julie and I do the same thing.
Yeah. And I've turned into a real journey mapping nerd. You call me the journey mapping queen, but I call myself a nerd. And so when Jeannie Bard and I started this with those 20 interviews and then we presented at UXPA, I've continued building on that. So I'm up to over 100 people that I've talked to looking for when you last created a journey map, what worked well, what didn't work well. We can learn so much from things that don't go well. What did you learn from that? What will you change the next time you do this? What advice would you give to people who are creating this? And it is so consistent. I didn't quantify this, but I've talked to a whole lot of people. The biggest problem with journey maps is they fall short of their impact. Why? Because we treated them as an artifact. We were done with the artifact and we went, okay, I'm going to move on to the next thing. We got reorged. I work on something different now. Or the consultant that made this for us, we paid them and they're on their way out the door. No, you need to treat it as a verb. Your personas, your journey mapping, your jobs to be done. Your work is not finished when you're finished with the deliverable. Your work is, I wouldn't say just starting because it started earlier with building alignment, getting stakeholder point of view, getting their assumptions out on the table so you can then help them understand when you learn things are really different, why. So I was working with a client once where in the initial stakeholder interviews, they believed that everyone would convert to premium, our premium offering. Of course they would, because it's amazing. And if they're not converting to premium offering, it's only because they don't have enough money. It is true that there are some people that don't have enough money to pay for premium, but there's a whole lot of other reasons why people are not paying for premium. And so by taking this person out into the field, going into people's real homes, talking to real customers, they were like mind blown. They had no idea why people were not converting to premium. And I was able to create a set of personas that helped them understand this kind of person is looking for this experience. That kind of person is looking for this other experience. Which kind of person do you want to optimize for? That company ended up using those personas for innovation for 7 years.
That's the thing. So what ends up happening if you do this right is
Yeah.
that the thing you create tends to be evergreen
Yeah.
because human beings, your users or customers or prospects or whatever, their wants and needs and goals don't change very fast. My wants and needs and goals with respect to buying a pair of shoes isn't all that different from somebody in 1876. The shoes themselves, the process, the materials I have to look at, the places I have to go, how I'm going to get there, totally different. But a persona I would have created for an 1876 person who wants and needs to get a pair of shoes, probably would still be valuable to Zappos today,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So that's the evergreenness of this, is it focuses back. And one way you can tell whether or not your company, listeners out there, get this is to look at your homepage of your main website and ask yourself, does the main text on the main part of the homepage of the website say why you, the user, should be psyched you found this? Or does it say why we, the company, are awesome?
Yeah.
Does it just say we are the shim sham shallywam of cross collaboration and the pollination of omni-channel data for enterprise? Or does it say finally a way to make sense of your in-store data?
Yeah, I love the fake example you gave, the shim sham,
Oh
shimmity
my God.
sham.
I've said shim sham before on the podcast, and somebody's like, where do I find shim sham? And I'm like, in my brain. All right, couple comments. Let's get to this. First of all, Marie said, and it's like I planted her, but I didn't. Alignment personas head exploding. And I'd love for her to ask more about that. Tell me why. And it sounds like it's head exploding in a good way. She says, can you go into how you create alignment personas? And just a pro tip, that's my whole thing. Like corporate enterprise is the problem. Julie helped solve the problem by understanding how to do journey maps. I solved the problem by a workshop I call Alignment in 5 Conversations and creating alignment personas collaboratively. And if you're interested in that, I'm launching coursework and a free ebook soon on alignbeforedesign.com, but you can ask more questions. And then Dan said, hope. So Dan, you said something earlier, and I don't know what this means actually. When we say it's just about the artifacts, and not about why we use the tool. We're bringing a cargo cult mentality to our work. I don't know what a cargo cult is. Do you, Julie?
No, I don't.
Yeah. And hopefully alignment doesn't fall victim to it. We'll find out. Maybe Dan will tell us. Also, he liked my corporate rap.
Your corporate rep, I was in stitches the first time I heard that. It's absolutely brilliant.
Oh, you mean my song. I think he meant my description of a homepage, but yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, your corporate underpants song is amazing. And I wonder if people are listening to this and saying, Tamara's talking about personas, Julie's talking about journey maps. Are these two things even related to each other? Yes. So I mentioned my 5 principles for maps with impact: focused, data driven, customized to your audience and your objectives, integrated, and then done collaboratively. The first thing there is focused. Who is this for? And who is the actor in the journey? Whose experience are we mapping? And so if you try to create a journey map of every single customer you've ever had, your head's going to explode. Like, it's incredibly, there's too much data in those journey maps. If you can get focused on new users or persona A or segment B, you've got to get focused. And so that's one of the best practices for a journey map with impact is it is focused. And if you don't have your personas, you're going to start to really struggle
Can't
when you try to
focus.
say,
And we
yeah.
get so upset about personas, but personas are everywhere in our work. And Cooper is so peeved about this for good reason. We keep yelling about personas suck, or personas are worthless, or personas without data is worthless. It's like saying documents suck. And now I'm going to say,
Yeah.
I'm going to use that. But also, whether you call them archetypes, whether you call them sketches, whether you call them segments, they're one name away from being a persona. So the actor, the customer, the user, if you agree that the word user is useless, anytime you get one step more specific, you're getting into the land of personas, and we will never not do that. For
Right.
example, a great case for me, I create collaborative personas collaborative, alignment personas collaboratively, which is a process of getting everybody who is your boss's boss, your great grand boss, or in some cases, executives, if it's a smaller company, to get in the room and get that. I have 5 steps too. Identify the measurable business goals, then get them all to barf out all the words they use for users today.
I
Then
love
get
that's barfing out. I love
it's barfing it out onto yellow sticky notes, which they always think will take forever
yeah.
and take exactly 20 minutes. So you picture people sitting there by themselves quietly writing sticky notes describing a person and a reason they show up at your product. The next step is clustering those under another color that start with the words I want or I need. Doesn't matter which one. And at that point, you have gotten them to go from thinking about dozens of users to thinking like people arriving at the site who want and need something. Then the 4th step is creating these sketchy candidate alignment personas. And by the way, that's a moment those become hypotheses. Now you can gather data.
Yeah.
Everybody who's all worried about assumptions and hating assumptions in our field, didn't you learn in 7th grade you're supposed to have a hypothesis before you do research? These are hypotheses. They're just organized. And then the last step for me is prioritizing them according to the goals that you did in step 1. So it's very, and I like that we both like, if you come up with a method, it should be 5 steps. It should be a workshop. But it's all about the process to get there.
Yeah.
That's just like people who talk a lot about roadmaps, like Melissa and Bruce. I, they should reflect clarity by being collaboratively created. They don't get written and suddenly magically cause clarity in people who had nothing to do with them.
Exactly.
They
Yeah.
can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting how similarly we approach our work because I generally, and I want to say always, but sometimes clients don't have time to do it this way. Create journey maps by hosting a workshop where I get cross-functional partners together. You can do this if you don't have data and you're just going on what people believe. And people often know a lot about their customers. When I say believe, it's like, what have we learned so far?
It's not just assumptions. These
Yeah.
people have been working in this field for a long time.
Yeah.
Everything they know or think about customers, 80% of it probably is pretty close.
It
And
can
unless
be.
it can be,
Yeah,
unless
you know, it's interesting, though, because this is why we take people out into the field for research. Because let's say that you are a bank that is targeting lower income people without good credit scores. And the people that are solving for them are the people that got their MBAs from either Harvard or Stanford. They don't really understand the worlds of the people that they are trying to solve for because they're not running out of money at the end of every month.
Right.
So it can be incredibly helpful to take stakeholders, whoever they are, be very senior leaders, product managers, designers, anybody, take those people out into the field to learn from real customers because it really helps them understand a world they may have built some assumptions on that are just not accurate.
Okay, so
And
that's why they have to So we both
Yeah.
teach journey maps, and I teach alignment, personas, and executive alignment. Within an org, you absolutely should learn to do these things and do them within your sphere of influence and maybe with your boss. There's always going to be a world for senior consultants like the two of us because you from inside your org and underneath can't wrangle this out of the executives. It is too fraught with danger, and the org chart itself will keep you from doing that. And some of what we do is come in as the person who wrote the book and make for a space where we are the ones who are telling them they have to do this and giving them the space to do it without any fear because we're coming in from the outside. Do you
Mhm.
find that to be true too?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think it's really interesting when I come in for journey mapping and I start with stakeholder interviews.
Yeah.
I'll say to people, what do you think is the biggest opportunity to improve the experience? Or what do you think is the biggest pain point? What tell me more about that? How do we know that? And you can do 10 stakeholder interviews and get 10 different answers. So we're starting there because we want to understand where they're coming from and then help them recognize that they're not aligned.
Oh, that's it. Oh my God. I can't believe you just said that's exactly we have to make a space where they can show each other that
Yep.
they're misaligned. No report, no one coming into the boss's office and saying your team is misaligned will ever work. What will work is them showing it to each other.
They got to feel it.
They got to see that their barf doesn't match.
Yeah.
All their
Yep, and so
colors are different.
going back to that initial case study I shared with you with that omni-channel retailer, that was so much the problem, is they weren't working together effectively. They weren't having the hard conversations. They were just dug in their own camps. It needs to be this way, it needs to be that way. And so by putting the experience on a page from start to finish, here is where this is breaking down. We're doing this in the online realm, including the app. We're doing this in the store realm. This is not a cohesive experience. This is so disjointed and customers can feel it. And so to get those people on board and have them recognize, oh, I can now see why customers are saying X, Y, and Z in these interviews. I now understand it. And we do need to fix this because it is in the way of us hitting our goals. Our
And
goal
that's
is to boost retention, boost loyalty, whatever your goal is. Oh, I can now see we're driving our customers crazy.
we're
We're driving me crazy.
we're all doing our best work and and releasing shitty products.
Yeah.
If that's the case, it's not about our tools though. So in the case of the 35-foot long law firm map, that crossed about 15 teams, right? And I use yellow sticky notes as questions, which is just to put the question on the map so we don't feel like we have to answer it now and we can keep going. Every single spot where there was a conjunction between two teams, yellow, party of yellow. You could just look at the thing and see that the handoff of information was mangled. None of that was sexy stuff. None of that was something that was going to be solved by AI, or this was years ago, but none of that is the thing that is going to be a fancy project. But oh my God, it will totally have an impact.
I'm
And
so
it's
glad you brought up AI because I think a lot about these days. I feel like there's a lot of implementation of AI happening because this is the time when we implement AI. But you can implement AI as a solution to your biggest problem. So when you understand the problem space, and again, you can represent that in a set of personas. You can take those personas into a journey map. So you're understanding the biggest needs our customers have. Let's use AI to solve those. Let's solve the right problems with AI. Let's not use AI for AI's sake.
problems first. If you that we've always talked about that, but I really want people out there to think about that whole idea that you should identify the problem before the solution.
Mhm.
Almost slips off our tongues and we don't think about it. Falling in love with the problem that our customers actually have is not something we're encouraged to do in our fields. Instead, we're encouraged to fall in love with ideas for solutions. Problems are dirty, dingy, boring, tedious. And when we understand those, then we can bring things to them to solve them rather than say, we have AI. Where can we point this bazooka?
Yeah. Let's sprinkle it everywhere.
Let's sprinkle it anywhere. And by the way, anybody who out there listening, this has happened many times over the past 20 years. It's just had different names. Omnichannel was the big AI, everybody needed it. Community tools were the big AI that everybody needed. ASP, remember? On websites,
Yep.
Java.
Yeah. Oh God.
Flash.
Yeah.
All of these
Flash.
things
Oh,
were seen as completely disruptive
yeah.
until they became part of the scenery
Yeah.
because they're part of the technology.
I loved the session that you did with Jared Spool. And by the way, I loved it that you were like, Jared fucking Spool, right?
Jared fucking
You
Spool.
and now I have a new life goal now. I want someday for Tamara Adlin to say, Jolly fucking Francis.
Oh my God, I say that all the
We've,
time. Okay.
we've been in this field for so long, and we've got our own experiences we've collected in figuring out why is this work not landing? Why are companies having such a hard time shipping great experiences for customers? It's so cultural. It's so much about us not working together. I have a great, actually, metaphor that I use. This came from, I'm spacing his name. It's a guy who wrote, Jeff Patton wrote the book User Story Mapping. He shares Cake Rex. And Cake Rex, go to cakerex.com if you
What
want
are
to just
oh, it's cake wrecks.
Cake
You mean
Rex.
like a cake and then car wreck?
Yeah,
Cake
no,
wrecks
it's the
are
cake.
hilarious.
The cake is
That's
the
a UX person?
So cakerex.com is a website where you can go and amuse yourself by
Right,
looking at cakes gone wrong. And
right.
what he says is if documents were enough, we wouldn't end up with cake recs like these because a shared document is not shared understanding. So when you look at these cake recs, there's a cake that's got flowers all over it. And then it says, can you draw in buttercream? They wrote, can you draw a unicorn? There's a cake that has balloons around the edges. And then they've written in buttercream, just balloons. Well, my favorite was actually a cake where they were celebrating somebody's graduate from law school. And instead of drawing the scales of justice in buttercream, they printed out the Wikipedia Commons entry for the scales of justice and printed it and stuck it on top of the cake. So apparently these cake wrecks are real. If you go to the website, they're very amusing. But clearly the person that had the bag of frosting in their hand who's looking at an order form, there was total communication breakdown between that order form and that person with the frosting in their hand. If a document with words was good enough, we wouldn't end up with cake wrecks like that.
I'm
If
stealing
a
that.
document with words and pretty images was enough. So think about that with personas. Think about that with your deck of jobs to be done. Think about that with your journey map. If the artifact itself was enough, we wouldn't end up with terrible customer experiences.
And
So
we
we
would
need to be
and
doing more than delivering documents.
we would consistently be launching great products because this is figured out. We know how to do great user-centered design and deliver products, and we know how to explain the ROI because all of the guys before us figured out how to explain the ROI, and we know how to explain the bottom line value. None of that is working, then it's a different fucking problem.
Yeah.
And we can argue about the tools till the cows come home. We can argue UX is dead till the cows. What a useless discussion. What's more useful is why isn't this stuff working? And it ends up being unbelievably human, which is another problem because every organization has this problem and no one raises their hand and says, we need an alignment workshop.
Yeah.
Why don't they, do you think?
Oh, that's such a good question. Yeah, I have no idea.
I think it's because who on earth could say that in a safe way?
And also, I think people are sick of going to workshops, especially during COVID. I think all those online workshops we all went to. And why are people sick of going to workshops? It's because what we generally do in workshops is brainstorm a whole bunch of ideas. So you end up with a million stickies and then nothing changes. Everybody goes,
Nothing
I
changes.
forgot the way they were working. So what I do in my workshops is, and it would be great to hear more about what you do in your workshops. What I do in my workshops is I get the champion in there. The most senior person who's the champion of this initiative must send out the invitation to that workshop. But I also want them to show up and kick it off and say, here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to leave, but y'all are going to do this. And at the end of the day, I'm going to come back. And I want you to share out cross-functionally what y'all have decided are the biggest needs our customers have that we're not meeting, the biggest opportunities, the most important metrics for us to track, whatever. But at the end of the day, they're presenting back to somebody senior. Here's what we have come up with today with our sleeves rolled up and all this sweating we've been doing because this has been hard. We've had hard conversation. And then the senior leader says, here's the next step. But we have a plan for how we're going to take those concepts we came up with and move them forward. They may get killed. They may go forward. We don't know yet, right? So far, all we have is an idea. But that is very different than having a brainstormed list of 500 things. In that workshop, we've got to come up with, out of these 500 things we brainstormed, what do we think are the most important, biggest opportunities for us? Whittle it down, develop it with a cross-functional perspective, and focus on next steps. Sometimes that next step is we're going to have another workshop next week. Sometimes it is we're going right into road mapping. Sometimes it is we're going to go straight into research. That's really great. When you brainstorm these ideas, you develop some concepts, you go straight into getting insights.
The only thing I do differently is I don't let the senior leader leave.
Oh, you want them to stay. I
I
find
am,
they shut down their team sometimes.
but I want it to be a bunch of senior people potentially. And the progression that I look for here, because I'm teaching this process that I'm saying needs a senior person to come in and run it. First, you do it a little and little. So, like in your example, I would say if somebody wanted to try this journey mapping, they should do it low in the organization just around themselves. And then they can show the results and say, oh, this is what kept us on track once they've finished a project. And that creates a pull. So if you can give
Yeah.
an example of how clarifying this is and a note from a couple of people because you tried it small, somebody's going to come up to you and say, wow, that sucked less than I thought it would. And you can say, we did this thing. And inevitably, what I get is, oh, we have to do this for all the teams. If you can create that pull, you have to show them something that's a relief. And getting all of the basics out on paper is often a relief because, again, that psychological safety, the way it feels to be a leader is that you missed an important meeting. Every leader, every day, every one of them, it's some part of themselves feels like they missed an important meeting or they're an asshole and they feel like they make all the rules. But if you feel like if you have that sense of I'm missing something because everybody else seems clear on this, everybody is, right? But who's gonna raise their hand and say, "I don't think we're clear on this?" You can't. So it's these psychological things that get in the way of great products.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. I feel like in the UX research profession, we're really biasing these days in hiring towards people that have PhDs, certainly masters. And I'm not sure that's the right thing for us to be doing because what you
They
don't
are.
learn in these PhD programs is how to have this kind of influence. And so you end up with these researchers who start their presentations with, we interviewed 2,679 people, which gives us a margin of error of this, blah, 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 blah. And then 20 minutes later, they start telling you what everybody's there to learn, which is what did you learn and what are we going to do about it? That's what they want to hear. And it's not just that they want to hear it in that meeting. Again, you need to have the relationships, be included in the conversations or the documents or both in order to have the influence. It is not about the research you're doing. It is about how you're helping people act on that. And I
Okay.
don't
So
teach that. I don't
I
teach that. How do you
no.
learn that? I think if you get a great mentor inside your company, outside your company, if you can get a great coach, that is going to be an investment in your career to make you more successful at that influence, which is how you help companies deliver better experiences.
And
That's
that's
what we're
exactly,
here.
yeah, that's what I coach on,
Yeah.
and I think you do too. That when I went to University of Washington when it was called technical communication degree. Now it's called human-centered design and
Was it
engineering.
was
It's
a
one of the
couple years ago. Yeah.
a couple few
Yeah.
years ago. And then I was on the external advisory board. And one of the things I pushed for was totally unreasonable, but also a really good idea, which is we shouldn't let anybody into the master's program unless they've worked for 3 years.
Yeah.
Because if you are just getting better and better at school, you are never really going to understand why being great at statistical analysis is not going to work. In fact, I'd say you made me think of another thing, which is if data hasn't worked in your organization so far, a new data collector is not going to help.
Oh, and I love what you say about if data was enough, people wouldn't get married anymore.
Yeah, that's my thing. If data was enough, people wouldn't get married because the data says, but the reason I love that metaphor, even though it sounds so harsh, is because the reasons people still get married make sense to us. They think they're the exception. Nobody goes into it thinking that it's not going to work. Everybody has their own reasons. It could be reasons that have nothing to do with love, like taxes. There are
Health
reasons,
insurance,
health insurance, right?
touchy
It has
subject.
nothing to do with, you can get around the data about divorces. You could read all the data in the world, but if you need health insurance, you get married and that your partner has it, like it doesn't matter. And our own data is easy to slide around as that. It's as easy to slide around data as to say, I'm getting married anyway because I want to share health insurance. Done. All the data goes away.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I have to apologize to my colleagues who've worked so hard to get their PhDs and their masters. I'm not saying they're always worthless.
No.
I do think what I'm saying is we have a lot of evidence now that the data is not enough,
Yes.
that it is, and I have a lot of complaints and criticisms about how companies are organized these days and where research sits, which then influences our sphere of influence. Because if we're sitting under design, that's really where we have influence. We need to be sitting, I think, with product. We need to be with all the other insights people. Like I would love to see more companies have teams where the market insights, the UX research, and the data science are all together on a team and working very closely with sales and solutions architects because they have a really useful point of view on the market and what their customers are saying. So, anyway, you want to have a PhD? Fantastic. You want to go get a master's? Great, go get a master's. But also, look
Also.
for a person in your company who has an incredible ability to tell a story, to command the attention of leadership, to have the influence. Doesn't matter if they're the same kind of researcher you are. Go talk to them and find out what their special sauce is. Go read that book Aligned.
Oh, read the book
Go
Aligned.
read the book Aligned. Go learn how to be more effective in the relationships that you have in the company because it is the relationship that's going to allow you to say the thing that people don't want to hear necessarily.
And once you read Aligned, then come to one of our workshops, right? Because
Yeah.
ours are both tools that fit into that model so well. They're the how. They're two different hows that fit into this. There are two different ways to actually start wrangling that alignment without getting yourself fired, right? Because you are now tiptoeing into the world of politics, DNA level questions that there are not answers to. It's not that you haven't asked the right question, it's that the right answer doesn't exist yet. So that makes our job to help people get to the end of the conversation. They've had the conversation a million times, they've had it in circles. Our job becomes how can we decide which one is most important to us right now?
Yeah.
How can I
Yeah.
help you decide that?
Yeah. And part of that is learning how to tell the CEO who got inspired in the middle of the night to propose a whole new feature. How do you tell them that baby's ugly? Because that's where so much of the thrash comes from in orgs. Somebody who's too distant from the people we're solving for because they fly around in a private jet or whatever. For whatever reason, they don't really understand the people that they're solving for. They're only referencing their own experience.
So what would be your approach? Because I know what mine would be. Tell me what you would do if you were working with a team and you'd gotten certain like amount down the road, and suddenly the stupid example I always use is like the CEO watched their nephew play Fortnite
Yep.
and suddenly comes in the next day and says, actually, to create an account, we should give you a gun and have you walk around a virtual. What do you say? Because you can't say that's the dumbest idea I've ever
Right.
heard, and they are allowed to make that. Let me ask you what you would say, Julie.
I think that's where the amazing improv training I got with Phil Terry when I worked at Creative Good, that really comes in handy because it's yes and. It's always yes. It's not no, but it's yes. I've met people like that too. That is so interesting. You know what? We actually have a study that we're doing next week in Japan. I would love for you to come. And if you can't, I'll just put together a 5-minute highlights reel for you to check out because let's go see if there are other people like that. And that's one of the most important problems for us to solve. Yes, we need to put guns in people's hands. That's a terrible analogy, isn't it? Can we?
No, sorry.
Can we but Fortnite, right?
I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
something
Um,
else like Pokemon. We need to be able to throw a ball at something in order to put it in our cart, whatever.
When I was at Meta, I actually did take a group of people to Japan and we got to go into people's homes and learn about how they were using virtual reality. And it was very eye-opening and very fascinating. And so the product managers, designers, leaders that were with me on that trip were in the van with the translator and the Japanese research team. And they were like this all day for days. And because they were just getting to see people that they don't normally get to see because they're so self-referential without even realizing they're doing it. They're creating products based on their own experience. So we're helping them understand the diversity out there. And we used to joke, we need to just buy an RV and drive it around the parking lot at Meta's headquarters in Menlo Park and put the product manager and the designer and the content strategist and the researcher and some senior leaders in there so they can have these conversations. So they can feel inspired. Whoa, that was really interesting and have the conversation because that's where the magic happens.
Okay, so let me add to that. Let me yes and that. My yes and, if they came in saying it needs to be like Pokemon, my yes and would sound like this. Yes, and that's a great idea for Barnaby. Barnaby would totally love that. However, we prioritized Philip and Ignacio. Okay.
You're talking about
And
your personas
the
now. It's like,
personas.
Barnaby. Yeah.
Yes. And so I would say, do we need to shift over to Barnaby, or are we still on Ignacio and Albert or whatever
Yeah.
I said? Then the question is not whether or not that's a good idea. The
Yeah.
question is, and often what the CEO will say, you're right, that's a total Barnaby thing. We have to focus on Ignacio for the time being. They decide because they created Ignacio, they created Bernard, and they prioritize them. Or they reprioritize and they're allowed to do that, but at least you know what the hell's going on.
Right.
And the yes and I would give to your van story is that before I let them go into a van, I would have them do a workshop together so at least they all had the same vocabulary. Because otherwise, the word user could mean the guy with the parrot or the paratrooper.
Right.
It and instead, are we talking about Bernard now, or are we talking about Ignacio now?
Right. Yeah. I think yes, and if they've chosen their priority personas, but also have they chosen their priority metric? So when
Yes.
somebody comes with this wild idea that they got over the weekend, you could say, "Oh, that is so interesting. Okay, so we had said these two things are our top metrics for this year, trying to move the needle. So let's think about this. How are we going to move the needle on this with your wild idea you came up with?" Just conversation.
How
Right?
will how
Never
will
put
that
them
be
on the defensive. Never
That's
put
right.
them on the defensive.
Nope. Tell me more about that. It sounds like a great idea for getting more people to get a demo in place. Is that what you're thinking too?
Yeah.
And you ask them questions that are respectful and clarifying and harken back to something they participated in and they decided. Because if you ever end up arguing, then you're putting the leader in a position of either looking weak by agreeing with you or of getting super defensive and pushing back, even if the idea is bad. It's just human stuff that we know in our everyday life. We just forget about it when we're at work.
Yep.
All right. So, what couple of things would you want to leave people with? If it's true that I'm trying to get this message out to people who've been in our field for a while and looking for new ways to think about how to become more senior, in addition to taking your class, or by the way, I have an free ebook coming out, and you can stay tuned for that and my classes. Beyond obviously getting more in touch with us, what do you suggest as people become more senior? The yes and I think is a genius. Like start using yes and.
Yeah.
What else do you think?
Yes, and
And
I would say focus on the verb, not the noun.
oh
You
God, I
know,
love that so much.
focusing on the verb of how we are working together and not on the document is so important, because if shared documents were enough, we wouldn't end up with cake wrecks. If shared documents were enough, we wouldn't go to so damn many meetings, right? It's not enough to share a document and write down the words. What you need to do is have the conversation, build the alignment through the conversation. How do you do that? All comes down to relationships. So get yourself a coach, get yourself a mentor who can really help you figure out when you're in your new job, when you're in your new position, because you got promoted, how to effectively build relationships, how to build rapport. Please start teaching that in your PhD programs. Hello, universe, teach that to people, because you can learn how to do that. You can learn how to do that. You could be more effective as a collaborator. And that's where the magic happens.
All right. There's absolutely nothing I can add to that. I agree with it so much. I think it's genius. I think you're so clear and crisp in your way you communicate. And thank you so much for taking the time today to do this. I just love you. I love our conversation.
Listen.
Julie fucking friend. All right, everybody. See you on the next live or in the next recording or whatever. Yes, and.
Great.
Yes,
Thank
and.
you.
Bye.
Yes, and.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Corporate Underpants, and there's lots more to come. If you have any projects that you need my help on, if you're interested in coaching to become a senior product leader through understanding alignment in politics, or if you're interested in any of the classes or books that I'm developing, please visit my website, adlininc.com, and get in touch.